Hello. Welcome to This Week in Politics. Well, right up front, I have to apologize. I woke up this morning and my throat is on fire. Every word that I speak is like glass in my throat. So I will be taking lots of drinks of water and probably coughing a lot. So I apologize up front. I would have put this off till next week, but this is just really on me to do this program. I found out I was listening to a radio program on the radio this last week, and Laura Ingraham was talking about the lawlessness of the Democratic Party, which is kind of an oxymoron. Democrats and lawlessness kind of have always gone together in my mind. But I started thinking about that, and I thought a lot of the stuff she was talking about could never and would never have been done without the complicity of the mainstream media. So we talk about that in our everyday conversation. And I think most people understand that the mainstream media is ultra left wing biased. They are anti Christian, anti white male, anti conservatism, anti Republican. They're anti everything except the lawlessness. They're anti police. They're anti justice. Uh, they're anti law. And I started thinking about that and I thought, well, why is that? And it occurred to me that the press is the only occupation outside of the government that is mentioned in our Constitution, and they have a freedom. And I think a lot of people in the press have taken that to mean that their job means something, and it really doesn't. It was put in the Constitution as a check and balance. We have the three forms of government, and each one is a check and balance on the other. The Constitution gives the press free rein so that the government cannot take over the press and use it as an arm of the government to control the masses. That's why it's there. However, what the Democrats and the press have done over the years is to morph into one thing. The press is pushing the left's agenda. Now, you have to ask yourself why. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons, but I'm going to theorize here and then I'm going to get into the specifics. I believe that, like most non Christian people in the world, they do not want Christians to be in charge because they do not want to be held accountable for their sins or their actions. And all you have to do is look at the things that they cover up. They don't cover up the sins of the Christians or the Republicans, but they sure do cover up the sins of the Democrats and the liberals. And what has the cost of that been? That's what I wanted to look into. That's what I want us to talk about. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down and we're going to look at, and I believe there's close to 30 of these um, instances where the press has either committed a crime without acknowledging it, covered up a crime done by somebody else, specifically liberals and Democrats, or misreported or ignored it. When if the shoe had been on the other foot, the complete opposite would have been done. It would have been exposed to death. To tear down and to tear up the Republicans, the conservatives, the right-wingers. And it gets so hard to explain this to people, especially millennials. They don't see it. They don't remember when Republicans were in office and we had Watergate. I remember for 2 or 3 years, every single day, there was many stories about how guilty Nixon was and the cover-up and everything that went involved with that. And as we go down, and for you millennials that don't believe me, go back and Google, because that's what your generation does. Google Watergate. Google Nixon. You will find thousands and thousands and thousands of articles. And back then, we only had 3 radio stations or 3 TV stations. So I want as that as our background, I want to go through these. Let's talk about Benghazi. All right. Benghazi, Hillary Clinton was in charge of the State Department, which was in charge of all the ambassadors' residences and their security around the country. Our ambassador in that place had begged for more security. He knew, and he told Clinton that the natives were restless and he needed more security. She ignored him and did nothing. And when they were attacked, did nothing and waited for days to do anything. And then when they found out that something happened, they blamed it on a movie. The Obama administration, Clinton, and Debbie what's-her-name Schultz, they all had the same narrative. It was a movie. Now, why would they do that? Because it was election time and Obama couldn't have the State Department blowing up just before an election. So they all agreed on a lie, and the press reported it dutifully. Can you imagine if that had been Nixon? Now, after it came out, the press always took Clinton's side. Then Clinton went to the hearings, and I watched the hearings, and she was nailed. They have the proof on her. There's no question at all about it. That's where she had her famous blow up where she yelled at Trey Gowdy and said, "At this point, what difference does it make?" The fact that she said that, the fact that she reacted that way proves that she was absolutely clueless on what the whole issue really was. Had a Republican done that, they would have blown that up. Clinton would never even have been electable. They would have absolutely crucified her. The press is responsible to this day for there being nobody held accountable for those 3 deaths held in Benghazi. Nobody's held responsible, and Clinton and her people are directly responsible, including Barack Hussein Obama. All right, let's talk about the email scandal. There is no doubt actually Comey, the head of the FBI at the time, came out and laid out the perfect case against Hillary Clinton for the email. She used an unsecured server. She stored tens of thousands of emails on that server. She had been hacked, we know, of at least 3 different times. So confidential information went around the world. Then when she was caught, she told him she had 1 device. It turned out she had 7. She said she turned over all of the appropriate emails. That was a lie. She said her attorneys had gone over all of them and said that which ones should go and which ones should not go. That was a lie. The remaining, she said they had one phone that was on that system. That was a lie. There was 7 others, and all 7 of those had been bleached bit. That means tried to scrub them clean, and then destroyed by hammers. These things we know to be facts. There is no question at all about that. What Comey ended up saying after laying out the perfect case against her, he said that the FBI was not going to prosecute because he did not think he could prove intent. First off, that wasn't his call to make, which is one of the reasons he got fired. And secondly, if you check around to very knowledgeable non-Democrat attorneys that are very familiar with how to prove intent, they said there was no question at all they could prove intent, and she should have been indicted and prosecuted and put into prison. And they cite as an example, there was a general somewhere that was on a boat and took a picture on his phone. It was an unintentional, he was sightseeing. It was an unintentional picture. He was caught with it on his phone, prosecuted, received time in pension or time in prison, and was kicked out of the military for one picture. Clinton had 30-some thousand emails. There's no question that was corrupt, and the press was behind Clinton the whole time. They swept that under the rug. They did their due diligence by printing a couple of things about it, and then it just died. Again, the press was complicit with the liberal Democrats. It doesn't matter the crime as long as the agenda is being served. Let's talk about Lois Lerner. Lois Lerner was the head of a division of the IRS in Ohio. She had emails and conversations with the head of the IRS and the Obama White House. And all of a sudden, the FBI has lost all of those emails with anybody else except the IRS, and half of those they lost. What was proven, what we do know, is that Lois Lerner was holding up applications for 501c3 status for groups. Because here's what happens. If you want to collect money and have it be tax deductible, you have to be a 501c3 under the IRS rules. So you go and apply. It takes about 30 days, 60 days. They go over your application, they give you a number, they issue you the paperwork, boom. Now you can start collecting money and doing whatever it is your thing is. And it doesn't matter. It could be political, it could be social, it could be ministerial, it could have been anything. So what this Lois Lerner did is she took all the applications from any group that had the words conservative, right-wing, Christian, evangelical, any buzzwords like that. And she told the IRS what she was doing, and they agreed, go ahead and do that. And it would take upwards of 6 months. Now, the bad part about it when she was caught was it was an election time. So all of these groups in Ohio that had applied for this was waiting to get their number so they could go have an impact on the election. Well, because she was holding them up, they couldn't go collect money. They couldn't do advertising. They couldn't do anything. So she was hamstringing the election. That's illegal. You can't do that. So she comes to Congress again. They try to interview her. She makes an opening statement and then takes the Fifth Amendment. Now, under the rules of the Senate, if you say anything, you have to answer everything. The only way you can take the Fifth is if you don't say a word. But she made an opening statement, which is a word. And then she took the Fifth. They held her in contempt. Okay? So far, so good. She walks out of there. The press pretty much buries it, calls it a nothing burger. And as it's buried, she gets to retire with full benefits. She's not fired. She's not held in. She doesn't go to jail. And the press buries it. It's a non-issue. So therefore, once again, the press is complicit in covering up illegal activities. Everything we're talking about today is about illegal activities. What Lois Lerner did was wrong. It's illegal. She should have been fired. She should have been held in contempt, which she was, but nothing was done about it. She didn't serve a day in jail. And she got to keep her job. And then eventually, quietly, she retired with full benefits and is still living her life as a retired government employee with no consequences. And the press is to be held accountable for that. Let's talk about Fast and Furious. This Fast and Furious was where they would, this has been going on for a while, where they would trade guns. Well, it started out actually when the Clintons were in Arkansas, and a little town outside of in Arkansas called Mena had a little abandoned airstrip, and Clinton and his cronies were bringing drugs in through that airport, and they were selling the drugs. And they were laundering the money by putting it into a department in the government and then loaning it out to their cronies and never collecting on the money. It was a huge scandal. Everybody knew it. There was a huge documentary done on it, and the press covered it up. So fast forward now, Obama's in office, and they are letting guns go down there and bringing drugs back. This finally stopped, I believe, under Paddock when he shot up Vegas, which we're going to get to later. They believed that he was running guns and selling guns under the auspices of the FBI and the CIA. So this Fast and Furious, they're running guns down south. We have a border guard that gets killed by one of these guns, and they've tracked him back. These drug lords got a hold of these guns, and they are using them against our people. We all know this to be true. The facts are out there, but the press let this die. They acknowledge about the Fast and Furious. The government officials know that it was happening, and they justify it by saying they let the guns go because they were trying to track them. Well, we lost a border guard because of those guns, and probably lost a lot of people in Vegas because of those guns. And yet the press covered that up. Selling those guns for either money or drugs is illegal. And it doesn't matter if the CIA does it or you and I do it. It's still illegal. And the press allowed that to go on because it was done by Obama. Under the Reagan administration, we had the Iran-Contra deal, and the press tried to crucify Reagan, but he didn't know anything about it, and I believe that because he ended up having Alzheimer's. But there was 2 or 3 people that went to jail under Iran-Contra, and that's when they were selling the guns to the Contras and then taking that money and using it for something else. I don't remember what they were using the money for. But the press jumped all over that when Reagan was in office, and 2 people went to jail because the press wouldn't let up. But Obama does it. They ignore it. People should have gone to jail. Agencies should have been gutted. Leaders should have been fired. And nothing was done because the press was complicit and let it happen. I said we'd get back to this later. Let's deal with this now. Las Vegas. I was very, very, very interested in Vegas. I watched all of the videos. I read all of the accounts. I watched all of the press conferences. And the FBI was in charge of that investigation, it was not the police sheriff in Vegas. He was the mouth, but the FBI was definitely in charge. Now, here's something the press I never saw anywhere, but that sheriff used to work for the FBI. But here's the interesting thing. As soon as the FBI got in, there was an absolute squelch. I mean, like after 3 or 4 press conferences, they just stopped holding press conferences. And the last one that sheriff held, he allowed no questions. The mainstream media did not push him. They did not allow anybody except the mainstream media in to film. And they didn't ask questions. They didn't embarrass. And I noticed when it happened, they absolutely shut down all reporting. I mean, 3 or 4 days after the shooting in Vegas, I picked up a newspaper. There was not one article, not one follow-up, and there hasn't been. Now, I understand the FBI wanting to shut it down because, well, I mean, I believe they were at the very least involved and probably in charge of that whole thing in Vegas before it happened. But what doesn't make sense is, why isn't there any investigations? Why was there no follow-up by the mainstream media? Why did they not go out and interview all 57 families? Why is there no archive information? Why are there no Freedom of Information Act so we can get videos or copies of any of the ballistics or any of the proof out of there? The press has been absolutely silent. Their silence on the Vegas shooting is deafening. There is blood on their hands for not following that up. Again, departments should have been gutted in the federal government. Heads should have rolled. Prison sentences should have been handed out. There was a lot of illegal activity, and the federal government is covering it up, and the press is being complicit with the Democrats. I have no idea why. But I know that it's true. The press has got blood on their hands from the Vegas ordeal just by keeping their mouth shut and not asking questions and not investigating. As I said, the purpose of the First Amendment was so that the press could be a check and balance on all parts of the government. That was the purpose. When part of the government goes astray, there should be investigative people in the press that holds them accountable. When they only start holding half of the government accountable, that's when we have problems. That's when all of these things happen, because the liberals know that they're not going to be held accountable. The press isn't going to report them. All of the crimes against humanity that Clinton and her crime syndicate has done, she's not going to be held accountable. The deep state right now, still to this day, is protecting Hillary Clinton. And why? It's not because they like her. Because as soon as Clinton falls, she knows where all the bodies are buried. That means the FBI, the Justice Department, they're all heads will roll. Because Clinton won't go down without letting everybody go. And by the time they get it all sorted out, the Clintons both will be dead. Everybody else will have retired. And nobody's going to be held accountable. You watch. And the press is complicit. Every crime that they have covered up intentionally, every crime they have not investigated intentionally, they have a share in that. In my opinion, silence is guilt. If you know that somebody is doing something wrong and it's your job to do it and you don't, I mean, let's say you're a police officer and your job is to get criminals. If you know that somebody's a criminal and you don't get them for whatever the reason, you like them, you believe in them, they're paying you. It's illegal. Any crime they commit, you are complicit in that because you should have put them in jail. It's the same with the press. All right, let's talk about the P file. Or as the press, when they do talk about it, which I don't think they do, but when the alternate media talks about it, they call it the Steele file. This was a totally made up intelligence, not even intelligence. It was a made up, somebody wrote a false story against Trump, put it in a file, and had somebody that was supposed to have a reputation, and then through hook and crook finally got it to the press. And because it was against Trump, the press gladly reported it in grave detail and have played this thing to death. Not the file, but the remnants of the file. This made up file was the reason they got FISA warrants to snoop on Trump and his people. That file was the reason they got Mueller to go after Trump. That file was the reason for a lot of illegal things that happened. That file is responsible for Republican careers to be ended. And they're still going after Republicans because of this totally made up file. And people in Washington all know that it's made up. Republicans and Democrats alike, they all know that that file is all lies, and yet they continue because the press is not pushing it. If the press would push just that thing and do an honest investigative report and interview everybody like it was Watergate. If they would do that, Mueller would be gone, careers would be restored, and faith would be restored to certain parts of our government. But the press isn't doing that because it was done by Clinton. Clinton is the one that got this story started. And it was not for intelligence. It was a hack piece against Trump before the election. And when it backfired, they continued to use this file to try to tear his presidency down. And Democrats will tell you that. And yet, nobody is held accountable. Why? Because the deep state is protecting her and the press is protecting the deep state. I call it the P file because part of the story in there was that Trump had prostitutes come into a room and pee on the bed, so I call it the P file. All right, let's talk about James Comey. James Comey is responsible for a lot of illegal things. We can go back and look at it. The sale of the uranium he signed off on, the unmasking, the P file. And then when he went to the email scandal, he was involved in all of those things. What we know for a fact, we know those things, but what we know for a fact that we can and should prosecute Comey is this. He lied under oath to the Senate. Then he admitted he lied. Then he admitted under oath to doing other illegal things. Number one, taking private notes on FBI letterhead. That's illegal. You can't do that. With the president, you can't do that. That's a violation Then he took it out of the FBI office to his house. That's illegal. You can't do that. He gave it to his friend. That's illegal. You can't do that. To publish in a newspaper, that's illegal. You can't do that. And when asked about it, he admitted to doing all of these things. And when asked for the purpose, he said, because I wanted the press to print it, which they did, and which that is illegal, so that they would appoint Mueller, a special counsel, to investigate the Trump administration and ultimately to tear the Trump administration down, which they're in the process of doing. He admits that that is all illegal, and the press is giving him not only a free pass, but the press gave him a big book deal, and now he's going out pushing this book and talking about selling the movie rights. They're making him a hero when what he did was illegal, and they are not making a big deal about it. They're making him a hero. The press should be held accountable. That is illegal. Everything that was involved in that whole thing is illegal. And the fact that he was only fired by Trump he should be counting his blessings, because right now he should be in prison. All right, let's talk about the Andrew McCabe firing. Andrew McCabe, I just found out today or yesterday, I don't remember, that he admitted to lying to Congress under oath. Okay, that is a jailable offense. He was fired by Trump for a lot of things. He has been responsible for covering up a lot of the Clinton issues. His wife was running for I believe it was a House or Senate seat in Virginia, and she got a $500,000 donation from the Clinton Foundation. Okay, so here's the picture. Andrew McCabe was in charge of investigating Hillary Clinton and the email scandal. His wife receives $500,000 from the Clinton Foundation. You think there might have been a conflict of interest, a little bit of pay to play? There is no question that is illegal. That was outright bribery, and that was why Trump fired him, as well he should have. But again, the press did not make a big deal about it. They did their due diligence. They wrote a couple of stories about it, and boom, it went off of the paper, and nobody said anything. They get the $500,000. She lost her seat, by the way. That money did not go to them directly from Clinton. It went from Clinton to the governor of Virginia, and I can't remember his name, but he was a close friend of the Clintons and he used to work for Bill Clinton in the White House, Terry McAuliffe. They gave the money to him, and he gave it to her. Very sleazy, very illegal, very unethical, it was a bribe. It was a bribe. That's illegal. You can't do that. And yet the press is letting it go. Debbie, what's her name, Schultz, used to be in charge of the Democratic National Committee. She hired a IT guy called Imran Awan and his family to do IT work, and they did IT work on a lot of the senators and House people. This guy was a crook. She paid him an absorbent amount of money for very little work. They were borrowing all kinds of money from the House bank, supposedly to buy real estate, but that's not what they were doing. They were taking that money, sending it right back to Pakistan. and they were robbing the U.S. government. They were taking a lot of the government secrets off of the IT computers that they were servicing and taking that information back to Pakistan to use and to sell to the Pakistani government. Imran Awan was arrested at the hospital or at the airport trying to leave the country. He was put in prison. He was charged. He was let out, pending trial, and it has just died. The press isn't covering this, and I believe if they ever did do an investigation into this, an honest, above-board investigation, they will find a lot more crimes these people did. This Imran Awan and his family, from everything that I have been able to find and see and read, they were criminals. They were committing treason in this country. They were robbing the government blind. They were committing fraud and theft and treason. And Imran and Debbie, what's her name, Schultz, knew that. And even after he was arrested and charged, she did not fire him. He was still on the payroll. And the press let that go. So any of the crimes that he commits should be on the press. All right, let's talk about the Uranium One scandal. This is a scandal that most liberals and Democrats don't even know about. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing because we've got 30 of these and we're only on number 10. But Bill Clinton was paid $500,000 to make a speech in Russia. That was a bribe. Through various machinations, Putin wanted to get a hold of part of our uranium in this country. We are not uranium sufficient. We still have to import some uranium, and uranium is critical in making nuclear warheads. That's why Putin wants to control it. So Putin can't buy it himself because they wouldn't sell it to him. So he buys a company in Canada, and that company in Canada sends $140 million to the Clinton Foundation just before she's prepared to vote on it in her committee. Because the sale of any company in the country that goes to a foreign company has to be approved by this committee. So, guess who sits on the committee? Clinton and all of her cronies. And there was a lot of bribery going on. The FBI had people implanted in the company, so the FBI was fully aware of what was going on and who the players were and how much bribery was going on and who was dirty, and they never said a word. And Hillary Clinton voted for it, and Obama signed off on it. 10% of our uranium in this country is now controlled by Putin. That's a crime. That is treason. That is giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Mainstream media has not reported on this one iota. Not one bit. And we know that it happened. There is no question at all that this happened. And yet the press has not reported on it. The press is equally, in my opinion, is equally guilty of treason as Hillary Clinton is. We covered the bribery of the Clintons. There's been many, many instances of bribery of the Clintons. This was just one that we just talked about. Well, since we're talking about the Clintons, let's talk about the Clinton Foundation. When Clinton became Secretary of State, what people and the mainstream media is not reporting is the reason she wanted that private server was so that they could make arrangements and run their criminal empire without having to turn the documents over to the government. As an example, all of these foreign governments and princes were donating millions and millions and millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation because they wanted access to the Secretary of State. They wanted to be able to pick up the phone and have the Secretary of State hear their phone call. So they were willing to pay for that access. And there was many, many, many instances, and even the mainstream media had to acknowledge a couple of these, but there's many, many, many of them. So they were bribing Clinton. Clinton was accepting the briberies and giving favors. The one we talked about a minute ago was the uranium, 20% uranium to Russia. That was just one example. There was many more from many other countries, and she accepted all that money. And even though we know it, and even though we can prove it, and you can prove intent, and you can follow the money, the most damning evidence is this. A week after she lost the election to Trump, they closed the Clinton Foundation. And why did they do that? Because who wants to donate money to a charity when they're not getting anything out of it? When they thought she was going to be president, they were willing to do that because now they were getting access not just to the Secretary of State, but to the President of the United States. And that was worth a lot more. But when she's not president, nobody else is donating. So if that was truly a charity, there's no reason that the money should dry up. Fundraisers are held all the time. Big foundations are up and running all the time because they're out fundraising. The Clintons aren't fundraising. They never were fundraisers. They never were a charity. They were a criminal enterprise, and everybody knows it, and everybody can prove it, and the press is not investigating. The press has not investigated this one bit. And why? Because they're liberal Democrats. And so is Clinton, and so is the foundation. And they're even trying to give legitimacy to it by trying to tout Chelsea as an up-and-comer. I call her Donkey. The press, in my opinion, is as legally culpable of all of these crimes that the Clinton Foundation committed as the Clinton Foundation itself, because they have not investigated, they've not done their job, they've not reported accurately, they've not reported the facts. And if you're a liberal Democrat in this country, I would be willing to bet you know nothing about the sale of 20% of our uranium to Putin. I bet you have no knowledge at all about that. You probably think, if you are a liberal Democrat, you probably think that the Clinton Foundation pay for play is just a right-wing smear campaign against Clinton, because that's what the mainstream media is preaching. Nothing is further from the truth. Let's talk about Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was not a movement. Black Lives Matter was a George Soros thug group intended to disrupt and divide this country. They condoned violence. They committed violence. They killed people. They robbed stores. They destroyed property. They lied. They did a lot of crimes. And the press treated them as though they were heroes, like they had a cause. They were the new civil rights. They were the new civil rights movement from the 60s. And nothing was further from the truth. They were nothing but a bunch of black thugs using the color of their skin to sow discord and division in this country. They were a divisive group. That was what George Soros wants. He wants disruption. He wants the order of things disrupted so that the military can be brought in and his people put in place. That's what the whole thing is about. And Black Lives Matter was just a pawn by Soros, paid for Soros to serve his purpose. And the press did no investigation. They did no reporting. They did not hold these people accountable. They've done no investigation. And I believe, again, in my opinion, the press should be held as equally in contempt for not doing their job to hold these people accountable as the people who did the crimes themselves. Now, do we hold individual reporters? I think we hold everybody in the press. So if a crime is committed in Cincinnati, Ohio, every newspaper head and editor, every TV head and program manager, every radio station owner gets the same crime as, or the same punishment as the people who committed these crimes. If we would hold these people accountable to do the job that the Constitution says they're supposed to do, we would start getting a more balanced look at the facts. All we as Americans ask for is the facts. I don't want your opinion. I don't want your bias. I don't want your viewpoint. I don't want your politics. Give me the facts and let me make up my own mind. We can't even get the facts. They are not reporting the facts. As I said, if you go ask a liberal Democrat friend of yours if they know anything about the sale of uranium to Putin, they won't. All right, let's talk about sanctuary cities and states. By the way, I don't like that name sanctuary. It gives it a religious connotation. These are outlaw cities and states. Let's talk about that. Immigration is, if it is a matter of national security, is under the direct authority of the president. There's no question of that. The Constitution states that. These states and cities, San Francisco, California, Illinois, I'm sad to say, and there's one out east, a little teeny state, New Hampshire maybe. These are in direct violation of the law. By allowing themselves and declaring themselves to be an outlaw city or state, what they are saying is this: if you are in this country illegally and you commit a crime, we will bring you in. We will prosecute you whatever way we decide. Now, the law says that we are supposed to then call ICE agents and have you deported. But we're not going to do that. We're going to turn you back out on the streets. That's illegal. Now, once again, the press has not been reporting this accurately. First off, they call it immigration. That is not immigrants. These people that we are talking about are not legal immigrants. They are illegal immigrants, okay? They're here illegally. We don't need a reason to deport them other than they are here illegally. Then they commit a crime. That's illegal. They now have 2 strikes against them. The city now covers their mistakes. That's illegal. You can't do that. And yet they do. And they turn them back out onto the streets. Now, once that happens, any crime that they commit should be held accountable to the people who release them and to the press who is not reporting this accurately. Again, the purpose of the press in the Constitution is to be a check and balance for the laws and to hold the politicians accountable. The politicians in San Francisco turned that guy loose, and he was caught and released several times, and then he killed that girl. Then he went to court, and the liberals out there, he admitted killing her, and they found him not guilty for some other reason. The federal government stepped in, and they're going to prosecute him, which is the way it should be. But they have become so unlawful in these outlaw cities and states that they don't even see that what they're doing is illegal. And that's why the press should be held equally. Now, how do we hold the press accountable? I believe this. That girl was killed in San Francisco. Whatever sentence this guy gets, because the federal government is going to prosecute him. If he gets 3 years in prison, let's just say, Again, the head of every newspaper, TV station, radio station, and magazine in the city of San Francisco should be hauled off to jail for 3 years for not doing their job. If they had done their job and done the investigation and made a public outcry out of it and done what the Constitution says they should have done, been a check and balance on our politicians, he would have not been free to go kill that woman. The illegal immigration. The illegal immigration coming across the border. It is illegal for them to be in this country. Okay? Illegal. This is not open for debate. This is not a matter of gray. We have an entire border patrol to keep the illegals out, to catch them and to deport them. We have a whole series of laws on the books in the federal government to protect our borders. And yet the press is duplicitous. How do I know? Read any article about the Mexicans coming up illegally, and you will find the word immigration or immigrant. They will not have the word illegal in front of them. That is a play on words, but it is in the word, in the business of words, which is the press, a turn of a phrase, the use of a word or a phrase, the addition or subtraction of a word or a phrase changes the whole complexity of an article. As an example, if there was a headline and it said, illegal immigrant deported, okay? Illegal immigrant deported. Or there was another head of an article and it said, immigrants being deported. Talking about the same article, the same circumstances, the same facts, but getting rid of the word illegal gives it a completely different meaning. And that's what the press is doing. And they do it not just with immigrants, but with most of these stories. They turn a phrase, they change a word, they change the focus, they look at it from a different perspective than the law. They are equally culpable for all of the crimes that these illegal immigrants are doing. The press needs to be held equally accountable. Okay, we talked about the Andrew McCabe. We talked about that one. Let's talk about the Loretta Lynch deal. Now, Loretta Lynch was the head of the Justice Department. And the FBI was looking into the Clinton email. Loretta Lynch meets Bill Clinton on a tarmac and they talk for 45 minutes. The very next day, Loretta Lynch has a meeting with Jim Comey and tells him to do not say that the FBI is looking into an investigation. She said, tell the committee that you are looking into a Clinton matter. Again, a change of a word, but it means a whole deal. Later that week, and Comey did that. After he did that, Hillary comes out and says if she's elected, she's going to keep Loretta Lynch on as head of the Justice Department. Obvious bribery. It's obvious what happened. Bill Clinton went onto that plane and said, look, this is if he uses the word investigation, we're sunk. So you have him say matter, because that's what our that's what the campaign, that's the word the campaign is using. They're looking into a matter. So you have Comey say matter, and we'll be good. So she marches off. tells Comey, Comey tells the Senate, and then Hillary comes out and says, if she's elected, Loretta Lynch will stay head. Bribery. Outright bribery. Everybody knows it. The facts are out there for everybody to see, and nobody is pushing it. The press has not investigated it. They have not talked about it. They have not pushed for an investigation. They have not written it up in the newspaper and made it a headline every day until something is done. They have let that matter just die, and she's going to go off into the sunset and keep her retirement, and she's not going to be held accountable. Again, the press should be held equally accountable. Let's talk about Hillary's brother. So Bill goes to China and takes Hillary's brother with him. While they're over there, they use a government program to get money. And here's how it worked. If you donate, I believe it's $500,000, and you create 10 American jobs, you can get a permanent visa to this country. Chinese want visas to get here. So Clinton went over there and said, give me $500,000. We'll start building cars down in Mississippi, I believe it was. And every time we hit 10 employees, we'll send you a green card or a permanent visa. So they did, and I don't remember how many. They had a lot of them lined up. I think even Mississippi got in on it. I think they donated the land. They did build the plant, but they never built one car. They did hire some employees, and so some of the Chinese did get the visas, but the majority of them did not. So as we sit here right now, the Chinese are suing Clinton, not Bill, but the brother, Hillary's brother. They are suing him to get their money back. They're never going to see it, but it was a scam. You can look at it again, another scam done by the Clintons, and her brother walked away with millions of dollars. The plant is empty. The employees were fired. Not one car was ever produced in that plant. And Mississippi got screwed because they donated the land. The only people that walked away free and clean was Clinton with the money. Everybody else involved got hurt. Now, it's an obvious scam. Clinton stole the money. It was a front. It was a scam. And the press isn't investigating it. And I'll bet if you go ask your liberal friends, they don't know anything about this. They've never even heard of this. They think this is a lie, but it's not. It's true. But the press isn't pushing it. And I think whatever the penalty is that Clinton should get, and he should get jail time for fraud. And again, so the people who are responsible for not prosecuting this, like whatever city it is in Mississippi, all the radio, TV, and newspaper owners in that city need to be prosecuted for the same time, jail time, that Clinton would get if he were prosecuted. And if we started doing this in every city, the press would say, hey, we better do our job or we're going to get the same thing they get. We can't turn our head and look against it. All right, let's talk about Pizzagate. Pizzagate, I think, is a misnomer. Let's call it Pizzagate. Pedophilia. There are a lot of big shots. And we know that this is a pedophile ring. And the reason it's not being prosecuted is because there's a lot of left-wing liberals. And we know that John Podesta's in it. We know that Bill and Hillary are in it. And we know that Dennis Hastert from Illinois was in it. And they know the people that are in it, but they're not going to push it. They gave it Pizzagate to make it sound like it was just a pizza pie. instead of calling it what it is, a pedophile ring. The abuse of children and the powerful people who are using it for fun and games. Let's call it what it is. It's illegal. It's abominable. It's a crime against humanity. It's a crime against kids, and the press is covering this up on purpose. And why? Because a lot of the left-wing liberals are involved. I guarantee you one thing. If Trump were involved in this, it would be on every paper, every radio station, TV station, magazine. There'd be books being written about it, and he would be drummed out of office within a month. But because the left wing is involved, you're not hearing a thing, you're not seeing a thing. And I think that the leaders here, every time one of these people, okay, so we know Dennis Hastert because he was caught. Whatever city Dennis Hastert was in that knew about it and did not push it and investigate it, they need to get the same sentence he got. And I think he got jail time. I don't know how much time he got. But again, the press is duplicitous. Okay, let's talk about the Clinton takeover of the DNC. And again, go ask your left-wing liberal friends. They don't even know this happened, but here's what happened. The DNC was running out of money before the end of the election. Hillary Clinton stepped in and said, I will give you the money, but I want to control everything that happens in the Democratic National Committee. I will be in charge of the hiring, the firing, what programs we do, the ground game, every decision that this committee makes, I will be in charge of. And in return for that, I will give you the money to continue to go. And Debbie, what's her name, Schultz, agreed. That is when the Democratic National Committee stole those elections, the primaries from Bernie Sanders, and ultimately, I believe, the presidency. Now, it is common practice for the president to be in charge of their committee. She wasn't president. She was running for president, and she took over the Democratic National Committee. That is illegal. You can't do that. And yet she did. Just this alone is the Clinton campaign, the Clinton Foundation, Hillary and Bill Clinton, Debbie what's-her-name Schultz, Donna Brazile, who came in afterwards, and the Democratic National Committee, and John Podesta are all involved in this. I believe they ran out of money because somebody stole it. That's what I think. Okay, I can't prove that, but the rest we can prove. All of those people and the press need to be held accountable. Why isn't the Washington press holding these people accountable to this? The facts are easy to get. The facts are available. Nothing's being done because there's so many scandals going on. The Obama administration was the most corrupt administration I've seen in my lifetime. This makes Tammany Hall look like peanuts. It makes the Grant administration look like the Boy Scouts. I just hit on the Bernie Sanders defeat. That was orchestrated totally and completely by Clinton. And yet he ended up backing her. And when Donna Brazile took over, she told Bernie what happened. And yet he backed Clinton in the thing. It's illegal, it's incestuous, it's wrong. And the press needs to be held accountable. Oh, the Oakland. Okay, let's talk about the Oakland mayor, that female out in Oakland, who found out that the ICE agents were getting ready to do a raid. So she comes out the day before and makes a loud proclamation telling all the illegals, hey, the cops are coming, run and hide. they had, the ICE agents said they had 800 people they were going after, 800 and something, and they got 100. So those 700 illegals that they did not get, every crime that they commit, that mayor of Oakland needs to be held accountable, and she needs to get the same sentence they get. And here's the justification for that, if you think that's too harsh. If there are 4 people in a car and they commit a robbery or a murder, but only one, so let's say one guy gets out and shoots somebody, gets back in the car, they drive down the road, the car's pulled over, all 4 are arrested. Who gets charged with murder? All 4. They are all 4 equally culpable under the law. And that's the same logic we should use here. Any crime that those illegals commit because she was involved, they would not be free if she had not opened her mouth. If she hadn't warned them that the police were coming, they would not be here. They would have been deported. So any crimes that they commit after that she should be held equally accountable, as should the press, because the press, again, is not going out and doing their research and doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be a check and balance against the press or against the politicians, and they're not. For not doing their job, they need to be held accountable. Now, this one absolutely disgusts me. Let's talk about Planned Parenthood. Yes, abortion is legal. I believe it's immoral. I believe it's against God. I believe it is murder. But it is legal. So from that standpoint, the press cannot be held accountable legally, in my opinion. However, it is illegal to sell babies' body parts. And we have undercover video footage of that happening. Now, the press has gone out of their way to downplay these videos, to try to show them to be gotten illegally or edited. They've done everything humanly possible to make it look like these videos are not proper. They are, by the way. There have been undercover recordings of supposed pimps going in, talking to Planned Parenthood about his girls getting abortions, and the people in Planned Parenthood advising this pimp how to get this done. That's illegal. You cannot do these things, and yet Planned Parenthood does it. We have it on video, we have it in audio, and yet the press is downplaying it and actually working against it. And why are they doing that? Because abortion is the sacred cow for Democrats. You can't talk against Planned Parenthood. You can't vote against Planned Parenthood. You can't say anything bad about Planned Parenthood. And the press is playing right into that. And again, in my opinion, the press has blood on their hands because of this. If they would report the truth and do the investigations into these babies being butchered and partial birth abortion being committed and baby parts being sold, and made that a headline on the paper, heads would roll, funding would stop, and these things would stop. So for every one that happens, the press has blood on their hands and they need to be held accountable. Let's talk about homosexual marriage. Homosexual marriage was declared illegal by most states in the Union. But the press got behind it. They pushed it. They lied about all kinds of facts in every state. And then when it went national, they lied again. They lied about poll numbers. They lied about a number of Americans behind it. They lied about the stands the church were taking against it. It was all based on lies. They did not do any investigation. They were being an extension of the Democratic Party. They wanted to have this. And again, what is their motivation? Why did they want this? Because if this was not allowed, then the Christian viewpoint was allowed to dominate. When that happens, then the country has to be accountable to God. And the Democrats do not want that. They want to be accountable to themselves. They don't want to be held to a higher account. And that's the whole thing. So they got behind this. They pushed it. Obama pushed it. Clinton pushed it. The press pushed it. And they managed to get it through. And I remember when it went to court, the day they were announcing the decision, Obama used the bully pulpit on the stairs in front of the courthouse and called the justices out on it. And it passed by one vote. I think for every abomination that has happened, for everything that has happened, for every illegal marriage in God's eyes that happens, I think every person in the press that was on that thing needs to be held accountable. And they're not going to be held accountable here. But when it comes Judgment Day, I believe God will hold them as equally accountable, and maybe more, because it's their job. It was their job to uphold the Constitution, not to change the Constitution. And the Constitution, it was illegal. Okay, let's talk about Eric Holder. Eric Holder was the head of the Department of Justice. He also lied to Congress, and he was held in contempt of Congress. He never went to prison. Again, he still runs free. Again, he got his pension. Again, just like Lois Lerner. When we talked earlier about the Fast and Furious, and I told you we lost a border agent. His name was Brian Terry. Congress told Eric Holder to turn over the papers regarding the Terry murder, and he refused. He didn't turn them over. He was held in contempt. Brian Terry was killed because Eric Holder and the Obama administration allowed those guns to go to Mexico. Drug lords got a hold of them and used one of them to kill Brian Terry, a Border Patrol agent. That's murder. He is and should be prosecuted for murder. He is in contempt of court. He didn't give the papers over, and he was allowed to retire and keep his money. And guess who hired him? The state of California to be their attorney to fight for sanctuary cities, another illegal thing against the federal government and the Constitution. Eric Holder is guilty of sin. He needs to be prosecuted and put in jail, and the press is perfectly silent. They're fine with him. He was also behind Black Lives Matter, and he was also behind getting a lot of the police departments around the country investigated for civil rights violations, which they were not guilty of. But the press is silent. They have not pushed it. And most liberals, again, don't even know anything about this because they're not reporting it. We talked about the Clinton drug cartel and the money laundering in Arkansas. Now, when Bill Clinton was in the White House, it was leaked that he was selling one of the bedrooms in the White House to the Chinese people that came in. And it was a scandal. And it did happen. You know, if you pay me $500,000, you can sleep in the Lincoln bedroom, kind of thing. And he took that money, and he was selling them out every opportunity he could. But the press did not make, if Reagan had done that, he'd have been impeached. They would have made a major issue out of it. And you know, the Constitution says you can be impeached for crimes and misdemeanors. I think selling a room in the White House, I think that qualifies as a crime and a misdemeanor. But nothing was done. Let's talk about Bernie Sanders' wife. She was a head of a college. She wanted to raise money to expand the college. And she went to the bank and lied, an outright lie. We know this to be true. She said she had X amount of millions donated. She need X amount of millions from the bank to make this thing happen. The bank gave her the loan. She didn't have the promises for the money that she told the bank she did. That's fraud. And she took the money and it disappeared and nobody knows where the money's at. She's not in jail. The last we heard, it was being investigated. And what that means, when Democrats are involved, what that means is we're going to let this die and nobody's going to ever hear about it because we're not going to push it. Where's the investigation by the press? Why aren't they talking to the bankers? Why don't they have copies of the loan papers? Why haven't they followed the money to see where the money went? If a Republican was involved, you can bet your dollar they would know every little detail. They're not going to push this. She got away with robbery and fraud, and nothing's going to happen. She might get a fine, and that's going to be it. Typical. We got one more that is just breaking. We know about Joe Biden's son. Went over, and in fact, I'm not really sure, but I do know that he started a fund with Chinese money that he had no experience in. And he took that money and came over here buying for the Chinese. Now, that's bad enough, but the companies that he's buying have things to do with military. And once the Chinese own them, all of the technology and secrets are immediately sent over to the Chinese. That, in my mind, is treason. And the guy that did this is Joe Biden's son, and I believe he's a relative of Kerry, John Kerry, son-in-law, I believe. But they started a fund, and I believe they got $3 billion from the Chinese government to go do that. They also got a $1.5 billion private equity. No, that was from China. $1.5 billion private equity from China, and then they got a $3 billion loan or grant, $3 billion grant secured by Biden to the private equity company. Let me make that easy for you. They got $3 billion, and they can do with it whatever they want to do because Biden got the loan for them. That's illegal. You can't do that. But the press isn't doing this, and I bet the liberals don't know anything about this. They've never heard about it, and they never will. There's a guy that wrote a book about it that's coming out, and that book is going to get played, but that particular one won't get played. And if it does, it'll hit for one day, and then it'll go away. Nobody will be prosecuted, but that is illegal. And again, the press is not being held accountable. Well, that's the ones that I came up with. I do want to talk a little bit about when we sum up. The press is mentioned in the Constitution because they're supposed to be a check and balance on the other three branches of government. But what has happened is they have become part of the Democrats' side, and they're only holding the right accountable. Not only are they holding the right accountable, but they are actively pursuing eliminating the right. That's what's going on right now. They're trying to get rid of Trump and the Republicans because they want the Democrats back in there. That is not the function of the press. We as Americans need to make that perfectly clear. Now, what we can all do is what I've done. I canceled my subscription to my local newspaper. I don't watch TV anymore. I don't listen to the radio anymore. I go on the internet and I try to search out facts. I try to do my own research. I try to know the facts that are going on and to find out the information on other things that are happening. And that in and of itself can be a challenge. But that's the purpose of a free press and a free people. We're allowed to make mistakes. We're allowed to be wrong. What we're not allowed to do if you're in the press is to take a side and prosecute the other side. Now, I like to end these by talking about current events. This has been a big week, and I don't want to hit these too long. But this week they had the first fatality from a driverless car in Tempe, Arizona. The lady that was hit was not in a crosswalk, and the result of it was Uber. It was an Uber car that did it, and they canceled their driverless experiment for further testing. And they have been doing this for months. This is the first fatality, and they've had driverless cars for months on the road in Tempe, Arizona. I think that's awesome, frankly. I'm sorry that there was a fatality, but how many other car deaths were there in the country? Or, pick another city that size and how many people in that city were killed by cars that had drivers. Also this week, the serial bomber in Austin, Texas blew himself up. He had 5 bombs. He killed 2 people. They did manage to track this kid down. He was in a car. As the police were coming towards him, he detonated a bomb. As I understand it, he did leave a note and an explanation. He said he was not sorry for what he did, and they know it was him because of some of the details he had left in that note about the bombs. Also this week, which was again downplayed by the press because it doesn't go with their narrative, but there was a school shooter. He was killed by a security guard in Maryland. A kid walked into the school. He shot a girl and the girl's boyfriend. And in that short amount of time, the school security guard turned around the corner, drew his weapon, and shot and killed the shooter. The shooter is dead, and the guard is a hero. And the press already, less than a week later, you can't find a story about it in the press, but we're still talking about those bozos down in Parkland that are trying to get marching for gun safety or whatever it is they're marching for. Who cares? Who knows? But the Democrats are using these kids in Parkland, and it is still dominating the press, where this guard who's a hero you can't find a story on it now if you want to. I think it's sad. Just one more example of the press being duplicitous, and they need to be held accountable. And we as Americans, we need to stand up, call it what it is, and hold them accountable. They can't do anything without our business and our money. So don't give it to them. And there's a list on my website at prayerboxministry.org of all the businesses that are left wingers that have done illegal and immoral things that we should not be doing business with. There's also a list over there of Christian businesses we should be doing business with, and that's www.prayerboxministry.org. Go over there and check us out. There's lots of stuff to do over there. It's an interactive website designed for you. So go over there and take a look. Well, that's about all the time I want to take today. I appreciate you listening. I felt like today was important, and if I coughed too much or drank too much water, I apologize. I made it through. I really didn't think I was going to make it. But all of our programs are done and sponsored by the Prayer Box Ministry. And as I said earlier, go over there and check us out. Well, that's program. You guys have a blessed week. I look forward to next week when we get to sit down and talk about this week in politics.